Welcome to Blueprints of Disruption. I am your host, Jessa McLean. If you know me at all, you know I've always got a lot to say about the NDP. In the wake of that circus of an election and the relegation of the party to almost fringe status, clearly there is a lot to discuss. I thought it would be apt to start by revisiting with Matt Fodor, who is a historian and the author of a book I reference all the time, From Layton to Singh. Now, some folks aren't going to want to hear this, but he's going to help me explain how decisions made during the Layton era led to the disaster we're seeing now. His writing, and the countless warnings from members over the years, should have been enough to at least get members and staff to reflect on the path they'd taken away from the party's core values. Yet, even in the wake of losing his own seat, the party leader stands firmly by their decision to cede so much ground to the Liberals. So we're here to make sure you don't let the party gaslight you into thinking this move was anything but the strategy of a consultant class more than happy to maintain the status quo. I see folks out there talking about reforms and who should the next leader be. These are inevitable, but I worry that some people with the most noble intentions will spend an incredible amount of energy trying to salvage something they don't fully understand. I'm going to add this episode to our Inside the NDP playlist, an extensive set of interviews, panels, and investigative reports that really should be required listening for anyone determined to take the path of reform. It goes through most of the mechanisms the party uses to suppress those efforts. And when put all together, it really makes the argument that the NDP is a moderating force for the left, and certainly not a revolutionary one. It can be hard to hear, but it also can be very validating. This will especially be true for anyone who has walked away from the party, but towards other modes of political engagement and community building. If you know someone like that, share this with them. Also be sure to check out our new Substack for even more content like this. Matt is back. Matt, reintroduce yourself to the audience, please.
My name's Matt Fodor. I'm a political scientist and author of From Layton to Singh, the 20-year conflict behind the NDP's deal with the Trudeau Liberals.
Okay, but now tell me what the real title was.
The 20-year battle for the NDP's soul.
You see, now that is going to speak more to our discussion today, right, Matt? Because we are going to react a little bit to the election, but Matt and I are in our I told you so era. And what that means is, like, I'm going back listening to recordings with Matt 2 years ago, things I did on my own. And it was just like, we could have told you this. We did tell you this would be the inevitable result. I feel like even after folks laid out all the evidence that people chose to ignore, I guess, the writing was on the wall kind of publicly with the decline of the NDP. And yet still, Matt, what did you say when you kind of hopped into the studio? There's people going, how did we get here? And what are we going to do now? Like almost like maybe we should have been planning for this moment years and years ago. I mean, not everybody caught what happened with Jack Layton, right? I think I will link Matt's first episode where we go over his book. We go over the years between Jack Layton and Jagmeet Singh, the who and the how and their why, their reasoning as to why they shifted the party to the center politically, ideologically, but also professionalized the party, meaning they removed the influence of members and ceded power to what I refer to as the consultant class or the inner circle. Party brass is another term I throw out there a lot. They are the same kind of grouping of people to me. That might have not been super obvious at the time, right? Because people are on a high when Jack was the official opposition. Matt, even right now, do you not still hear people going, Jack would be rolling over in his grave?
Absolutely.
I wish we had him back again.
Absolutely.
What's your reaction when you hear that?
Well, I mean, hindsight's, I guess we don't really know. But I think that the 2011 election was, I think looking back, it's very much fortuitous or even a fluke in a lot of ways. There were conditions going on in Quebec with the decline of the bloc. At that time, there was the federal Liberals were obviously in their worst state, and with Michael Ignatieff leading them. They didn't. There were a lot of strongholds they didn't win in. Historic strongholds didn't even win in then. So, and it also was very, very much dependent on, yes, on Jack's leadership, personality, personal appeal, which was something that, that couldn't be sustained. I think this belief that this move to the center was certainly the crowd around Brad Levine, for example, said it's because they, removed the socialism or moved to the center or whatever, was what was responsible, and really it was something that couldn't be sustained. And once the Liberal Party got revived, the NDP went back to third, and even worse from worse than that.
And they kept the same tactics.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're talking about the orange wave or orange crush, the orange wave. A lot of people have looked back at that time very fondly. And so now that Jagmeet has stepped down and the party has been completely decimated, not even official party status anymore, folks are often looking to a new leader as a solution.
Yeah.
And I love how you mentioned there one of the biggest points in pushing away from leadership cults is that they're unsustainable and you can't replicate the conditions in which they thrived. It's just such a variable that you can't really control. And eventually, we know you don't keep the same leader forever unless you're the Green Party. So you do have to eventually have a underlying game plan. To look just like the Liberals seem to have just been their plan long term.
Yeah. They're just hoping one day the Liberals are finally get off the scene, and then we have our orange Liberal team will displace them.
And BC did that, right? Like it was BC ended up in power to the demise of the Liberals, and now they govern as Liberals.
Yeah.
That isn't a win. Yeah, that's not a win for the working class.
That's right. The Western provinces, they function basically like the Liberal Party of Canada does federally. They're more or less the small L Liberal, big tent center left.
Yeah, they filled that gap or took over that gap, however you want to see it. Some people will still say that is the best strategy, that the world's not ready for a socialist leader, that they have to play it safe, that this is what appeals to people. I think that is malarkey. But even if you think it is a ploy to simply gain power, one just needs to look to the BC NDP to know that it's not just a game, it's actually how they will govern. The reason we red flag all of these things, which is not a very popular move in partisan circles, is because, when you see your leaders doing that, you can pretty much guarantee they'll do that or worse when they're in power. So,
plenty of examples.
Plenty of examples. So I'm reading a statement by Matthew Green where he says he's not going anywhere. He's talking about rebuilding the party. But in the same conversation, he is agreeing with the move by Jagmeet to essentially blow up the party. And Matt reuses that term, supermajority, which is just misleading to people. We don't have a supermajority. That's hyperbole. I mean, conservative majority is awful scenario. But, now you have both Jagmeet and then Matthew Green, a prospective new leader, if you listen to a lot of the grassroots, both of them agreeing with this move, that it was worth it. It was worth the demise of their party, as though it was some little club that they could just kind of restart.
Yeah.
And not an anchor in the Overton window, right? Like it was just something we would just throw away an ideology for a bit because heaven forbid we had Polyev prime minister. We were much better off with a Wall Street banker. Like that's what the concession was, a Wall Street banker for all that they gave up.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's as if like, yeah, you're right. As if we could just switch this thing back on in 4 years, right? As if like, okay, people, for just some temporary reprieve, but don't worry, we'll be back. And yeah, that they did tank the party. It's kind of almost like a coping or almost excuse in a way, right? Like, well, that's what we intended to do, right? We didn't, we wanted to do this almost as if it's like, well, not really. Their own messaging was, there was a problem with the leadership cult around Jagmeet, and they didn't, they certainly didn't make a very good case. I think when he kept saying things like liberal supermajorities coming, and so it's safe to vote for us. But again, at the same time, he was also saying Polyev must be stopped at all costs. So people, voted liberal, and we can't win, so people voted liberal. I mean, the messaging was very confused. And you're right, as if we can just turn this, we can just go back, offset the far right, and then come back at 18% in 4 years, no problem. I wouldn't bet all my life savings on that approach.
No, and the number of seats is kind of irrelevant if they're going to toe a neoliberal line, right? If we're talking about winning as being gaining a few more seats at the table, then I think we've already lost.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Because at this point, it should be obvious when you said, like, what have we should have been doing when everyone saw that the NDP was drifting to center? I mean, it's not like nobody did anything, right? So great efforts have been made in the party to try to reform it, to stop this shift, to push back, to democratize it better, to center membership voices.
All unsuccessful.
We were all unsuccessful, absolutely. Not just that, we didn't just not accomplish what our goals were. We were hurt, attacked, some removed from the party, some were just so incredibly burnt out from politics that they might not ever re-enter. The loss that we actually have from their efforts to push activists away are immeasurable. We've lost good MPs, although I do believe that they're much better off outside the party. I think they can get a lot more accomplished outside the party. But again, I say that, and that is for some, but I think some of the other evidence of the NDP perhaps not being the vehicle that people want it to be, or maybe that it began as, is the amount of former high-ranking NDPers that end up part of that consultant class.
And McGrath, Brad Levine, mentioned the point that in my book. They became lobbyists very quickly after around 2012 or so.
John Horgan,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Brian Topp.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not just about winning. It's actually about staying in the consulting class has an interest in winning that way, or no, or losing that way. But as long as they stay, like as long as they stay, as long as they have access to this consulting class world.
It is because, like, we'd like to think that everybody goes into the People's Party unselfishly, right? With grandiose goals, communal vision. But the reality is, a lot of politicians are also in a career, and they make choices based on what is best for them as individuals. Maybe they don't believe they're conceding so much ground or they're doing so much detriment to the left, but they are, right? And that playing it safe isn't just a political strategy that some are trying to convince themselves will get votes, even though they've just been bleeding seats with this strategy ever since. It is a personal strategy to remain employable, to capital. I think not an NDP example, but just seeing Adam Vaughan now working for Therme after being one of the big advocates to save Ontario Place, I think is just another one of those red flags that people should have when they start really putting all of their hopes into politicians. Because, yeah, the rot of the NDP goes so much further than any leader could fix. Even if someone with intimate knowledge of what the problem is from a member's perspective were to even be in that role isn't even designed for that. So I get really kind of disappointed when I see smart people, right? People I can politically joust with, just daydreaming about what if Wab Kinew or Matthew Green would just lead this party out of oblivion. And I wish they would just free themselves from that a little bit. But where do you see the NDP going from here? Like, will they try to change tact?
I think some of the provincial parties might, start losing interest in the federal party, since it's, become such a irrelevant. Like, we can see this in Alberta recently, where they just had their, I guess, convention, and they voted to have an opt out for provincial NDP members in Alberta. They don't want to they want to opt out of federal party membership.
Right, because automatically a provincial membership gets you a federal membership. It doesn't work the other way around. And folks like to pretend that they're different parties. And I think that move by Alberta is a symbolic one anyway.
Yeah, I think that I think there will be an effort. I think I really think that the left really ought to rethink its strategy. But I think there's still going to be a bit of a clinging to the nostalgia of the NDP that's still going to have to be that really needs to be questioned. Yeah, I mean among our comrades, right? Like there's people who are still like, yeah, as you say, there's still people who still kind of believe in the idea of the NDP, that the old CCF type party or something. But it's like we've had 60 years later. It's really
Yeah, this is not that.
Mhm, mhm.
This is not that. I think I know where those people are coming from. I
Yeah,
get it. It seems very daunting to try to build something fresh.
yeah, yeah.
But I'm telling people are already doing it. So people you can connect with folks at, there's a revolutionary party that I'll interview in the next coming weeks. We know the Communist Party of Canada still exists, although it has its own issues as well. But I interviewed folks out east, the Atlantic Regional Communists. I reference them again all the time because they are born from disgruntled NDP, Green, and even anarchist organizers who saw all the things wrong with those institutions, the NDP and the Greens there, and slowly built up a model that was almost the antithesis of it. And so they are organizing politically. They will be able to intervene politically, maybe not in elections just yet, but that isn't the be all end all, because I think that's another thing that keeps these hangers on is they think that the vote or winning seats at this table is like key. It's they won't let it go, and I understand not letting it go completely. That is dangerous in itself, right? But they just believe that it holds, I think, a lot more promise to change than it really does. And without another option, it's just like, well, this seems easier. And I assure you, it is not. I believe, Matt, the only way folks, because they'll be strategizing. I know they are. I've seen the meetings popping up, and I know folks are going to start going at maybe at the riding association level, right? Trying to get power there so that you can move it forward. Please believe me, because I feel like I didn't get the message out there well enough. I mean, the whole podcast, Matt, was to draw people away from the party, really. Like it's not in its branding, but it was like there are so many other things you can do if you want to be a rabble rouser, if you want socialism, if you want to defend your communities. Like there are so many other places that won't hurt you like that, who won't hold you down like that. You can do so much more. But I'm telling you, if you're determined, if they're determined out there, and I know they are, please don't use any of the avenues that they've built. Like, you guys just think outside the box, be as disruptive as possible. Don't look at the Constitution. Fuck it, they don't care about it. Don't worry about 2 weeks notice for meetings, this, that, passing votes and resolutions. No, 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 no. You got to go at this like it was a corporation that you were trying to bust open. Like, it is held by people who will not cede their power that easily. And it's not just the director. You can have Lucy Watson, who's the national director right now, who completely torpedoed Ontario with the assistance of all the same people we're talking about. But, is likely the person who could take a fall alongside Jagmeet. But even that will not cut it. And every avenue you try, they know you're coming through those avenues. They've seen us come through those avenues and they've bricked them up. And so what I see is just the old guard appointing another really bland leader, a Merit Styles level type leader for the NDP, and continuing to play it safe. I mean, the purge is just too big. Where are all those people going to go, Matt? Back to their day jobs? Like, there's a whole system built out of it now.
But now but now look at the results. I mean, one of the main arguments for keeping sticking with the NDP is like, we have this sort of this mass party. Even that argument of, at least, it's better to work with something big and institutionalized. But now they just got 6% of the vote nationally. When you're trying to cling to this idea that we got them, this is where the masses are. Like, what are you talking about? Like the Green Party. I just noted that the Green Party's best ever result was a higher percentage of the vote than the NDP just did now. Like when Elizabeth May in 2008, when she first led the Green Party. So, it's like, I think so. I think that this illusion of the NDP being a mass party of the working class or the unions or the activists. I mean, it's not really.
Matt, how ironic. How ironic is it for an institution like that to saddle up to the status quo just to end up a fringe party?
Yeah,
It's so like it accomplished the exact opposite. We wanted to appear like the big boys, right? We were going to play like the liberals and even the cons, play their game so that people, can't even tell the difference between us. And then they end up like all the radical.
yeah, exactly.
They end up out there with the commies anyway.
That's right. That's right. That's where they're headed. So we should be talking about building something out of the ashes of this. All these different forces. But I mean, there's some institutional, loyalties and so on that exist. But maybe this situation will open people's minds a bit. We'll see.
We'll see. Labor has a role here too, right? That kind of complicates the problem because where do they go?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, they want them. I mean, the pragmatic business unions again, like when you're not dealing with a big party. I mean, anymore. So they're going to probably just be more pragmatic, and start being cozy with the liberals.
That's not a good.
No, I think no, it's not. Did you see Sid Ryan sing the other day?
You know what? I saw Sid's response where he was kind of getting obviously
Yeah.
some flack in the comments and came back out going, please, like, can we not take this moment to finally be reflective? Can you not all react like you have been for the last 50 years and just coming at everybody who has an idea of how you could have done better? Because that's one thing that pisses me off about partisan politics, too, is the inability to critique. You obviously can't talk about it leading up to the election,
Yeah.
right? Because then you're just helping the opposition. That's what everyone tells you, right? No, and you can't talk about it during an election. That is like the big. Even I had an episode I held for so long because the election was called, and I was like, I got comrades out there that are working the NDP. I'll hold it. I'll hold it. What good am I going to do right now in the middle the election? They were even able to silence me all these years later. I held that episode the whole campaign. It was like just warning flags as to what the NDP was doing, even after an election, an obvious loss.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a safe place to start talking about what coulda, shoulda. Even then, you're opening yourself up and sticking your neck out. And that has been the culture within that party for so long. People think the only barriers are institutional ones. And like, I can list them all, right? I feel like I can have a map, a video game of how you could like try to get through here and what the big bosses will look like. But sometimes it's actually your fellow members that end up holding back change because of the fears we talked about earlier, right? They've got the same worries about what happens in the absence of the NDP. But yeah, Labor's put themselves into a bit of a pickle because, rightfully so, they've not much, some of them, there's exceptions, obviously, saddled up to the Liberals or Ford. Lyuna, I'm looking at you, you pieces of shit. But, for the most part, it is their party. And the amount of delegates they keep getting is like affirmation that is their party. But now what do? Like, what do they can't just, I know you say like being pragmatic would have you believe like, okay, the next best option is the Liberals, but that's like back to work legislation party.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, long term, if you have any decent goals as a labor leader, you can't be, I'm looking at like the Fred Hahn even.
Yeah.
What does Fred do?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I'd like to know what Fred's opinion on the election.
I don't think he's allowed to give it. Like.
Yeah. I haven't heard anything there, but yeah, it's what do you do with the more social, the more progressive unions? What are they going to be doing? It's a good question. I mean, they couldn't get it's stunning. I mean, it said point out the numbers of union members, households, families in Ontario. They couldn't deliver one seat in Ontario.
Yeah, he was talking about how many voters were represented by a union household here in Ontario and not being able to even get one seat federally. even considering, Ontario NDP, although they, the last election I don't think was a win for them, that's another discussion, is still pretty healthy numbers wise in the House. So, but it's the taste they left. Sid is also speaking to the inability of unions to politicize their members. Like, why aren't they voting this way? But I think Sid's also talking about, logistically, like, how could you not have at least poured enough resources into Matthew Green's riding that you won that riding? Or, like, how did we, with this amount of resources, not get one seat? Like, what are we doing? Are we all over the place? And I wonder what their role is, because it seems like a quid pro quo kind of relationship where I hold Labour largely responsible for the inability to reform the party. Every convention and even on the riding level, they are pulling for HQ, right? They are doing the bidding of central office, voting who they're supposed to vote for, prioritizing the resolutions that they're told to. But what have they ever gotten in return? That's the part I don't get. Like, what? I've never seen them really go to bat for workers. We didn't get them to really go to bat for Palestine. So what are they getting out of helping to suppress change within the party like that? That puzzles me still. You have any theories?
I don't know. It's just, I guess it's just what you're used to. This idea, and they used to have a party you could influence and get some stuff out of. There's a pragmatic element that I think, but I don't see what they're getting from it. It's true. I don't get it. It's just. I think it's almost like what you're used to. You're almost just you don't know you don't know what else to do.
It is, and it's the lack of other clear options, right? Because even with 7 seats, and you do make that point, and I agree with you, they've almost got fringe status, and that can't be the line of appeal now. But the infrastructure that they have there is not the same as other parties. And if we're just talking, resource rich, we're talking about an office, we're talking about branding that's already done, even though it's tainted. You're talking about databases full of contacts and, the riding level association structures. But really, none of those are positive elements that you can't replace. Yeah, they're going to have to find their way through this. But I see the federal party kind of disappearing in the near future. I think
it's stunning to me that, it isn't stunning. Stunning is too strong, but it's remarkable. Let's just say remarkable that the Liberals have moved to the right with Carney from Trudeau. Literally picked a central banker, who's saying, "Yep, you're right. I'm not Trudeau. I got rid of that. I'm more about managing the economy, which we know all that means
transforming the economy,
managing, but good. I'm much more focused on managing the economy, et cetera, et cetera. And why, and they move to the right, and then the liberals renew, and NDP voters still end up voting strategically, overwhelmingly for the Liberals. It's where's that political space of like just progressive social democracy? Like,
no,
it's gone. It's
gone. It's gone.
Yeah, it's stunning, and in a lot of ways, but in some way,
that's what happens though when you're going door to door as an NDP volunteer and you're trying to convince, like, I don't give a shit what the poll numbers show. Big picture, right? What are people seeing on the news every night? They're seeing it's like everything Carney is to save us from Polyev, right? That is the overwhelming narrative. They could go onto any website and see what the prospects are for their riding and strategize and, incumbent this versus that. Yeah, but in the end, most people don't have time. They're not doing it on that level. They're seeing it as it's red versus blue, and this orange can't even shading wise is not all that distinguishable from red. And so they're like, I don't get it. Like, because I've gone door to door many, 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 many times, right, for the NDP. And you are asked, what makes you different than the Liberals? And you really do.
Then you draw a blank.
Well, you have to go to your history. You have to start hearkening back to the founding values of the party. And once CASA was signed, like when I see Jagmeet standing up there saying, I made this call to stop Polyev, I made this call with the Liberals, even though he admits you couldn't trust them. I see him as talking about CASA, not just the election. right? That cementing of the two parties together, almost indistinguishable. And then, you come to an election time where you needed to be, like, again, I'm just like a broken record, that boisterous, defiant alternative. And they weren't. They were standing in front of Canadians who can't afford groceries, who are in horrible material conditions, and the prospect of it getting worse, right, with this trade war. And they are telling you to celebrate means tested dental care that is partially rolled out to dentists who feel charitable. That is like telling workers who've lived through 15% inflation to be thankful that after a 5-week strike, they got a 2% increase. That's what it's telling. And everyone sat there going, are you fucking kidding me? Like, you would have to hit on the household where they had benefited from dental care in a way that transformed their life for them to say, I would give you that shot. That was so transformative and bold. And they couldn't even in the ashes now, they can't acknowledge that they should have done more with the position that they had. Even on Gaza. Nothing. They never leveraged that position for Gaza, but still you have Matthew Green, who owes nothing to the party in this moment, or does he? Right? What is I don't know what his plans are, but he's still standing back going, yep, that was the right call. I think his quote is, if I walked away from my job, but I gave 9,000 people in Hamilton dental care, I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
In a class war, in a rise of fascism, you are satisfied with means-tested dental care.
Yeah, that you must fold the tent, volumes. Right? No, like, seriously, you're folding the tent, like, seriously.
And that tells you what they ever thought the prospects of the NDP were as a vehicle of change.
Yeah, that's it. They're trying to spin that as like the great transformative moment of the 21st century. Yeah, no, it's true. And they had no critique of, like, they couldn't develop any critique of Carney at all. I thought did you see
not a creative
one. Like, did you see the piece in the Walrus called Mark Carney, Cutthroat Capitalist?
No. I'll link it to the show notes because
it's great. It's a great takedown of Carney's of Carney and Brookfield, and says no, he pretends he kind of presents himself as this socially conscious, like, economist or something like that, but he's actually just like the ruthless heart of capitalism today. They talk about the tax dodging and their involvement in housing, and it's an extraordinary piece, and you need that kind of, like, you couldn't get the kind of, the NDP was not capable of fomenting a sort of like class war or class perspective in this election. I mean, Polyev was better. Polyev and the Conservatives were better at fomenting the rage about that, including sometimes even the corporate links of the Liberals. It's, however hypocritically, they still did it, and people felt that you're standing up to the capitalist establishment by voting Conservative. And meanwhile the NDP's just like still saying the only reason the Liberals were good, it was because we had CASA. It's because we influenced them to do something with CASA. Not really talking about how, like, capitalism is screwing people, and Carney is at the center of that.
Yeah, we got tidbits here and there, but there's even a moment in the debate where Jagmeet even seems to pivot away. I don't know. I think the Bloc actually had a good comment for Carney. And Jagmeet says, I'm not going to talk about that. I want to talk about housing. And housing is an important issue. I get it. But yeah, and I'm undecided. Well, I'm not, but I'll give people benefit of the doubt where that is, again, playing into the strategy of making sure Polyev goes down, right? Pointing out the problems with the cons and not going too hard on Carney out of fear. It's handing it to Polyev, because I mean, we even experienced that, right? Like, even when I was criticizing Carney during the election, I was attacked from both sides, like from progressives and from liberals, where you're handing this to Polyev. Oh, you must be a conservative. Quite literally, like, socialist is in my bio just because I know I confuse people when I shit on the NDP, like, just so you know. But they weren't taking any of it. But I think it's a little bit of that, and a lot of being controlled opposition, a little bit of being happy with centrism and thinking that's the peaceful, easier solution to the rise of fascism or really right-wing ideology. But, economically speaking, they're all the same, right? Like they're just worried about the social aspect, or at least that's what they pretend to be. But I think, yeah, one of the roles of the NDP, whether it's knowingly, I'm still struggling this, like whether it's just the conditions that create this entity of just keeping the most radical elements of the left kind of tired, busy, caught up, or not within the electoral sphere, by just like maintaining that Canadian democracy by suppressing that element as much as possible, or whether it was done maliciously or is being done by actors maliciously. And the more capital consultants you have like openly employed by the NDP and intervening, in the case of BC's leadership race, where a consultant firm was like the deciding factor in EB being premier and suppressing that grassroots movement, it's really hard to not make the argument that it is now being done very intently and maliciously to destroy the left in Canada.
Yeah.
I mean, people cringe when they hear that, and I even hear you chuckle, right? Because it's like, no, not the NDP. But I've gone from, okay, if you're going to go into those circles, I can arm you with some knowledge that will help you through it, perhaps. Like, I'm not coming with you, but here's what to expect. Don't be naive. But now I'm going like, you're feeding into this monster still, and it is still draining the left and shifting the Overton window and taking up resources and time and hope. If Matthew Green thinks that the only thing the NDP could have possibly accomplished in those 8 years was that dental care, what does that say to all the people that are like in legislated poverty that see the ONDP as, or any level of the NDP as the only way out of it? Who have like real life and death kind of material situations where surely the only party that would even give them a sniff of time is the NDP, and they're playing these games with the political spectrum.
Crumbs at the table, crumbs from the table. That's what they're telling people to be happy about.
Yeah, like in a time where there was such opportunity to harness the rebellious, angry element that, first I think really reared its head when the pandemic started, right? And no one was helped with all the resources our government had, like really just left us out hanging to dry. And the right, predictably, got mad and channeled that rage into, something productive or not. I mean, they got the mask mandates dropped. That was their main goal, according to their demands. But in the end, it mobilized them in a way that carried them through till now, right? Where they're this force to be reckoned with. And the left grassroots base is all fragmented into the different issues that they're trying to solve, right? No large one vehicle to carry them. Except John Clark says all the MPs in the NDP can now fit into a van.
Yeah, they can. So it's it's absolutely, we've really seen a decline of the left. I think there's a lot. I think there's some broader things going on, but the NDP's done nothing to counter. I mean, we're well aware of what the problem is, and when you're that we've had 40 years of neoliberalism kind of like basically destroying solidarity and causing massive levels of inequality. And now you're seeing the impact of that. But but the NDP was complicit in it. Either you wanted to be part of it, or you knew and you didn't bother to really counter it. I mean, I don't know which is more charitable, an excuse.
I'm sitting here going, who am I more mad at? I was trying to answer your question there, and I'm equally enraged.
The bad faith, I don't know if they're bad faith. We mad at the consultant class, or the people who propped them up by maintaining illusions.
I'm definitely more mad at the folks that didn't have courage.
Yeah.
The consultant class is doing their job. I'm like, they're just kind of class traitors or class enemies, depending on where they're at. I'll tell you, it hurts a lot more when you share the same ideological values as fellow members. But when you're standing there seeing this so obvious, your hands are in the air and you're pointing at it, and they're just going, shh. can you not do that in a more respectful way? Like, have you tried, passing a resolution on this? And like, there's a time and a place, and this isn't it. And, it's a mix of respectability politics and protecting the institution, even the reverence for Robert's rules. I think the NDP has some really, really good people in its base, but folks need to be honest with themselves that there are a lot of centrists that are a part of its base. Deep down, they know socialism is the answer, but they don't believe it's possible. And so they're happy in the place that they are right now. I mean, they're not happy with 7 seats, but they're really not sitting back and thinking strategy was the problem. They think a new leader.
New leader, even just, this was just an anomaly given the political situation. We can go, given the Trump situation and so on, we're going right to back. It's not in any way a repudiation of us. It was just, a bad situation. And if anything, it shows how principled we are by tanking our party.
Yeah, you feel the gaslighting, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I'm supposed to praise you for this now, am I?
This is like, Tommy Douglas standing up to the War Measures Act. I mean, the equivalent what Jagmeet did to stop Carney or to stop Polyev or whatever. It's just the illusions are astounding.
That concession speech, I was equally embarrassed for him. He couldn't get through it.
He got 18% of his own riding.
How could you not be humble in that moment at all? How could you not admit that any one of your moves you were second guessing? He not only stood by all of it, like acting like some fucking hero, he praised his staff. And I get it. I mean, these people work for you. We are a workers' party. You should always thank your workers. That's not the vibe I'm trying to give out. But when he says his staff, he's talking about Jennifer Howard. He's talking about, those are his bosses. It doesn't work.
Essentially, they are, yeah.
Yes, yeah. It doesn't work like how other workplaces are. When leader isn't the boss, leader is a figurehead. Jagmeet didn't even get to really decide on his own chief of staff. That was an old recycled stalwart that just got shifted around the party, loss after loss. And because he originally did pick his own chief of staff, and she was a fucking nightmare.
Oh yeah,
Melissa Bruno. People might not even remember her because it was such a short-lived stint there, but she was so awful to members and was just, I mean, I guess not doing it in as slick a way as Jennifer Howard could have. They brought the old guard in to show them how it was done.
That's right.
And it even got more suppressive after that. Yeah, he was praising the very people who have spent decades now sidelining socialism, suppressing membership, dismantling any modicum of democracy inside the party. And that's what pisses me off when folks start looking for a leader. You do need a new leader. I mean, there's going to be a race. If you're still paying dues to the party, by all means, I think you should have a say in it. You won't. You won't have a say in it. That's another episode altogether. We've done one. I'll link it. The conventions are fixed. The leadership races, we haven't had one in a while. I mean, Merritt Stiles was appointed. The Prairies had some fuck-ups. I think Alberta is the only kind of race we've had, and that wasn't even a race. So it's not the party you think it is in terms of that. But the staff there would, even if they were all to leave, like all the usual suspects that I could name off, it's just the way the party is now structured too, right? Like, this is 2 decades of not just manipulation or like bad election choices, right? Like, they go into election time with bad strategy. It's like they have put in mechanisms within the institution to make sure it's very difficult for anything else to exist.
Hence, why the what would Jack have done or situation? What would Jack be thinking is precisely the problem. Because I say in my book, it's his it was really his leadership really was the consolidation of this consultant class happened under Jack Layton, and we're paying for this 20 years later.
You lay that case out beautifully, and there's no arguing it, but the history of suppressing socialism.
That's older than 20 years. It's like
It is older than Jack. We can't fully blame Jack for that. Although
no, 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 no.
although there are some of the same players still, it's still that inner circle making those same decisions, right? Like you're talking about, the Lewis family was at the spearhead of getting rid of the waffles.
That's right.
We talk about
That's
the
right.
waffles a lot, and people are like, oh, Abby Lewis is another choice for leader. The only time he's ever meaningfully spoken out about the party was when it happened in BC. But I'll tell you that he messaged me telling me I'm way too abrasive in my approach, that the lambasting the party publicly just wasn't, in the party's best interest. Of course, until it was one of his campaigns that he was behind that they fucked with, then he had no problem coming out and speaking against them and trying to maneuver his way around it. But when it's just a lowly little grassroots fucker like me doing it, it's like, well, now, you don't know how this works. And I know exactly how that party works. That's the problem. So I hate breaking down people's heroes, because, like, you give me an example. I think I tweeted out the other day, look, let's make it easy for you. If your choice for next leader is in any way in good standing with Anne McGrath or HQ, it's the wrong choice.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, exactly. There was a book a couple years ago called Party of Conscience, which was a series of essays on the CCF NDP, the history of the CCF NDP. I was among the contributors to the book. There is a I think it's the foreword, or maybe it's just a chapter by Avi Lewis. He does talk about the waffle, and he basically says that he was just a kid when this was happening, but he just couldn't understand why these waffle people were just so bitter. It's like, why can't we move on, kind of like. So yeah, that maybe the apple doesn't fall as far from the tree as people seem to think.
Well, my dad was a waffle, so I don't think they do fall too far from the tree. And the grudge doesn't go just because it was an awful way to treat people who were trying to reform the party, but it was a continued pattern. That it's an environment that never left, right? It was just different targets, and there's lulls, right? So the Waffle Party existed, they were kicked out. And Judy Ryback just did a great interview with The Breach where she details a couple other efforts that activists made to form coalitions of sort, go through the party and try to reform it that way. I lived through an era where we attempted to do that, and the result was always just this great kind of burnout recession of activism, and then another rebuild. It's almost like some youth come in, they forget the lessons or don't bother learning the lessons of the past. They have all these great ideas, and they do, right? I'm seeing them online, and I hate that feeling where it's like, that is a great idea. That would work. Except, and I've got this litany.
We tried it 4 times.
Yeah, and it's not like, oh, if I couldn't do it, you couldn't do it. It's just you have to go through the trenches and through these mechanisms to understand what they are, or that they even exist, because it's not like this communal project where if enough people have these good ideas and they come together and form a political party, those ideas become a reality. But folks will still re-enter these spaces thinking that that is just naturally how it works. And I don't think the NDP is actually all that unique from other parties in terms of party democracy. I think, again, it's just one of those, we wanted to appear and work like our opponents because they win all the time. Yeah, an electoral win at any cost isn't even a win at all. So I don't want them back winning 24, 25, or 100 and some odd seats if still, they're going to stand up there and demonize taxes, be perfectly okay with increased military spending, not spend any time trying to pull that window back to the left. They're better off where they are, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's absolutely, it's a, the party is, it is what it is, and people who want to get involved with it, it's better to understand it, to better understand what you're getting into rather than going down the 5th attempt to remake the party, which will probably not work.
No, because it's like capitalism in a way, that you can institute small reforms that make it more tolerable. But if you really want to operate in a system that isn't ultimately oppressive, then you really have to start from the bottom and make it everything the opposite. And, it's not that simple, but it really It kind of really is, because these are colonial institutions that are, mimic the same systems we're trying to dismantle. So it's no wonder that they breed this type of centrism and kind of status quo politics. They're in a game that's built for that.
Well, is it time to have this discussion, right, about build a new party of the left?
Yeah, and I will, like I said, like I've got the Revolutionary Party coming in to talk. I mean, Sean Orr with Cope in Vancouver is
Yeah, that's
that
exciting.
is
Yeah.
exciting because that does tell people. I think it's a different animal on the municipal level. I think that's a great starting point for people to figure out what they do want their political parties, to look like. And I think the most important is, what does it look like in the 3 years, if you have them, 3, 4 years in between elections? Not just what is the product once the writ is dropped, because by then it's too late.
Yeah.
So any party that's just focusing on the numbers game of getting so many seats in the most strategic riding so that they can just glean a little bit more power in the House of Commons is a losing formula for the working class. That works for our enemies because they're trying to maintain that status quo, right? We are trying to do the opposite. And so playing the same game with the same rules and the same tactics is to just become our opponents.
Yep, which is more or less what happened. I mean, except unsuccessfully, less successfully.
Less successfully. Where do you think Jagmeet ends up?
And I don't know, Instagram celebrity. I don't know.
What's the one industry he didn't really ever critique very well?
um,
I would say big oil and gas. He sure can't follow his brother's footsteps and end up lobbying for Metro or Sobeys or whoever he's kind of demonized the grocery CEOs. I mean, he did focus on Galen, maybe to leave a couple doors open, but I think that will be very telling. It was like when John Horgan, previous premier for the BC NDP, ended up with a coal giant afterwards.
who knows? I mean, it's just. But anyway, making a personality cult around Jagmeet just wasn't the answer.
What are they going to do with all those T-shirts? They'll have a fire sale of these T-shirts. They'll be like memorabilia. But I am going to have a moment when Jagmeet does finally pop up somewhere. I mean, if it's in the Ontario NDP, I will groan loudly. But I'm thinking private sector awaits the man who basically handed Brookfield the election.
Brookfield Capital, yeah, they're gonna give him some Brookfield. He's gonna be we're taking a job with Brookfield.
He did Wall Street and Capital a massive favor, not just by making sure their boy Carney got in there in a really kind of slick way where folks are just like cheering for it, right? We're now cheering for our own demise because it's not Polyev. On top of that, yeah, he also helped to destroy the political left in Canada, which is just every capitalist dream as well. So surely rewards await him. We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but anyway, definitely interested in hearing from this Revolutionary Party. But yeah, there's now that the left is quite small and quite dispersed in a lot of ways. It might be interesting to have this kind of conversation. I guess you point to Sean Orr's victory in Vancouver. That's probably one of the most exciting things that's happened on the left at a time where there doesn't seem to be a lot of excitement on the left in Canada these days. That's good to hear.
Electoral left. We should clarify when we say that because I think tenant organizing is the most exciting thing.
Should be looking to I guess maybe a little bit from Nikki Ashton's campaign, from Dimitri Lascaris, like the people who kind of supported those campaigns, get them, get some sort of like the left is kind of dispersed now.
And you're still I know you're talking about the people who worked on those campaigns, but I don't want to fall into another just trying to find
savior or another the right leader. Yeah. I mean, the idea of starting something new. I mean, there's really at the point where it's that conceivable option. I don't know where things are headed, but I do think we need to be considering new electoral options. I don't know what I think. There's still a structure there not going to be able to afford to pay as many people to stay in their organization now. But but I think you're right. I think it's just going to go back and forth. You say, look, we selflessly destructed ourselves in the last election. It was for the good of the people. Now we're back. Give us, let's go back to 18% and, back to what it was, but I'm not so sure if you can put the genie back in the bottle.
No, I imagine some people will try and we will end up talking about them and those efforts and what happened to them in a later show. Again, it was the same feeling when you came in, I think 2 years ago now. Very validating, right? To find somebody else who, you had all kinds of receipts though for everything we felt. We felt the shift, we saw the manipulation and the end effects of it, but never knew that they had almost made it official. Like you were able to find like public statements that, we're not just speculating that this was their strategy.
This was a conscious effort to remake the party. Yeah.
Into this.
Yeah.
So you can thank Anne McGrath probably the most. We've name dropped her quite a few times, but that if she's going to take credit for Jack's campaign, then she can continue to take credit.
And if you're listening,
oh, the joy I would find knowing that she listens to my critiques of the NDP. But alas, I don't think she is that open to criticism. But yeah, no, thanks for coming in, Matt, and just unpacking this election. Very rarely am I able to find somebody who's kind of at the same place a little bit with this awful knowledge that we have, where we wish it wasn't so. We wish we could say like, yes, rebuild, it just needs a little bit of a tweak. And I imagine you didn't write that book just as a historical artifact. It was a warning sign, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, exactly. And I wasn't sure exactly where it was going to go, but, I did feel that this strategy was ultimately not viable. I think that this day was coming, and yet it's still like, still a lot to process nonetheless. Once you said you couldn't win, I mean, it's safe to vote for us because we can't win. It's not a very, very, we just, because Carney's going to win anyway, but I don't know what the hell their message even was.
I don't think they did, but that was like the least of their problems at that point. I think they'd already solidified their fate.
Yeah.
Well, I think in part Jack did, right? And the refusal for members to, once they recognized it, turn it around, to take the effort and turn it around.
Yeah, the members are irrelevant, and it's just it's just a consultant class and their little leadership cult. And
you should re-release your book, obviously with a foreword and a new title. This is like, I told you so.
Yeah, will do. I'm gonna get on that.
That is a wrap on another episode of Blueprints of Disruption. If you'd like to help us continue disrupting the status quo, please share our content, and if you have the means, consider becoming a patron. Not only does our support come from the progressive community, so does our content. So reach out to us and let us know what or who we should be amplifying. So until next time, keep disrupting.